Welcome to the Selling from the Heart podcast on the Salescast Network. You've joined a global movement of sales professionals who are dedicated to being authentic and building trust. We call it Selling from the Heart. Together, we are on a mission to bring sincerity and substance to the sales profession we all love. Get ready to be inspired and equipped as we join our hosts, Larry Levine and Daryl Amy.
Does your CEO value trust and authenticity as a foundation of your company culture? If so, they'll love my award-winning book, Selling in a Post-Trust World.
This powerful book dives into the principles of authentic leadership, showing how trust and meaningful relationships can drive real results. It's a must-read for leaders who prioritize people, connection, and culture.
Now, you can send your CEO a free copy of this game-changing book. It's simple, free, and the perfect way to celebrate a leader who leads with heart.
So visit ceo.sellingfromtheheart.net and we'll send a free copy of the book to your CEO today. That's ceo.sellingfromtheheart.net. Because leaders who value trust will embrace this book and take your company's culture to the next level. Hello and welcome back to the Selling from the Heart podcast. Your co-host, Daryl Amy, here today with Larry Levine. What's going on, Larry?
Hey, great seeing you. We got all kinds of things going on. Hey, this year is just, you know what? I just remember it's like last year we're wrapping up the year, welcoming everyone into the new year. Where is this year going? Tell me.
It is flying by, but I tell you, one thing you don't want to miss as fast as this year is going is our guest today. We got Colleen Stanley in the house, and this is going to be a dynamite conversation. Larry, I'm so excited though, as fast as this year is moving, all the things that are going on, we continually hear from our friends inside the Selling from the Heart network. We've got Selling from the Heart champions all over the world, and it's so much fun to interact with you. We'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. Larry, these conversations we get to have week by week are just fantastic.
You know, they are. And I just have to give a special shout out to a dear friend of mine. His name's Sean Donahue. And Sean's a great leader out there leading a great sales team. He waves the flag on Selling from the Heart. He listens. So, Sean, I appreciate you. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, here. Hats off. Once again, we would love to hear from you. But I'll tell you what, you're going to love hearing from our guests today. We've got Colleen Stanley right back in the studio with us today. She's the founder and president of SalesLeadership Incorporated and a renowned author recognized for integrating emotional intelligence with consultative selling skills. You'll recognize her influential books, Emotional Intelligence for Sales Success and Emotional Intelligence for Sales Leadership. These books have been translated into 8 languages, impacting readers worldwide. In fact, I just saw one of them has been translated into Italian. How cool is that? But previously, she was the vice president of sales and marketing at Varsity Spirit Corporation. There, she helped grow sales from $8 million to $90 million and developed the EI selling system, which combines emotional intelligence and consultative techniques. It's no wonder she was named a top sales influencer by Salesforce and one of the top 30 global sales gurus. Colleen's expertise has reshaped modern sales approaches, and she's here with us today. Welcome back to the Selling from the Heart studios. It's so cool to have you here.
Wow, what an intro. I think my head is getting rather large. So we need to temper it.
Hey, but you know, that's how we roll here at Selling from the Heart. So
that's right. And that's the story.
Thank you for the nice intro.
Well, we're going to talk about some of the mentors that helped you along the way. But as we get started, you know the question that every guest on the Selling from the Heart podcast answers. And that is, Colleen, what does it mean to you to sell from the heart?
So I love your question that you always start with. And I had a little time to think about this. So to me, what's in your heart comes out of your mouth, right? So if you're showing up to sell, you're probably not showing up to serve. If you are showing up to be generous, that means you're probably not going to have that scarcity mentality. Or if you've got this bitter heart, somebody done you wrong or you didn't get the deal. But if you've got a better heart, it's like, okay, I've got a lesson learned here. So to me, what's in your heart comes out your mouth, influences every action you take or don't take.
Oh, this is so good because I've always said, right, in order to sell from the heart, you have to know what's in it.
Yes.
And the heart work is the hardest work. And I think you'll agree, Colleen, I know Daryl does, is every morning we got to be working on our heart health. And there's multiple ways to work on our heart health.
Well, for me, and I'm sure for the two of you, my morning starts with gratitude first. And then I usually end up reading something spiritual and engaging in prayer, because to me, the most important meeting I can have of the day is the one I'm going to have with myself. Because if I don't, believe me, there's a reason I wrote books on EQ. I needed it. There is no perfection on the screen here. I mean, I am a former hothead. I've been judgmental of people. I've been impatient. And so it's a non-negotiable for me at this point.
I love it. I love it. I love that. Get bitter or get better. And one of the biggest things that has helped, I think, all of us get better in life, those of us who are fortunate to have mentors behind us. And so we did read that amazing introduction and all of the great things that you've been able to do to contribute. But my understanding is that you had a lot of people contribute to your career along the way. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Yes, and I'll even back up a little bit, where in my time of gratitude, what I noticed is that I was almost going through my whole life, and I was noticing these mentors all the way from grade school through corporate life. And so, it landed in my head, I need to write a book on mentorship. However, as you two know, I've been writing books on sales. That's what I do. And so after 4 years of this idea rolling around in my head, I finally did it. But I did hire a coach, Lois Kramer, and I wanted some clarity on the positioning. And I actually wanted a little bit of input on why I was so motivated to write this book. And so I shared a personal story, and I'll share it with the two of you. When I was 14, I had an older brother, John, and he was tragically killed in a car accident. He's just one of these great human beings. He was, I'm in a small town. We grew up in a small town of 900. So John was class president. He was the football star, track star. And yet he was always such a kind individual to people. So it really devastated my parents. And literally within a year, they were divorced. And it was a pretty contentious divorce. So where I'm headed is that my parents were really struggling emotionally. And so they weren't able to step up often to fill those emotional voids. And so I told this story to Lois, and she goes, that's why you're writing this book. Throughout your life, you've had so many people that stepped up, and you remembered it because it was so important. And I will tell you, both of you, it was a mic drop moment, because I always had mentor stories, and it didn't seem like a lot of my friends had as many as I did. So that's kind of the backstory on, I think, why the idea of it landed in my head and heart.
I'm a massive believer in mentors. And what's really interesting in listening to your story, I was just sitting going back in time and back in time and back in time. I go, can I actually remember my first mentor? And I don't know if I can or not. So, it's interesting. I didn't learn about mentorship till later in life, as opposed to younger in life.
I don't think most people do, because I think you have to have a certain amount of emotional maturity to realize, oh, that was mentorship. Because I think there's a little bit of a myth, and this is just my perspective. And I think it's why more people don't step up to mentor. We believe that we've got to be equipped with big degrees, big accomplishments, or I'm going to have to spend 15 hours a week with this person to make a difference. And I can tell you, because I've reflected so much in my times of gratitude in the morning, it can be one sentence that can change the game. And that's what I want to encourage people. Just be more intentional about how you show up. And so I have lots of what I call mentor moments. And it was simply a mentor saying one thing, and all of a sudden it shifted my thinking and how I showed up.
I love that. I love that. And I think the world is hungry for mentors. And Larry, I'm similar, although I can remember early on, it was about that age when I had of your story, and what a touching story. I had a 14-year-old, my 14-year-old self had a mentor that came along, and that's the first time. And you just think about, go back, and I want to send a note to Dave after this call, if I can figure out where he lives. I don't even know. But what an amazing effect that had on me as a young teenager and just beginning to try to figure the world out. So I'm curious, when you think about, I want to get to practical in a few minutes, but when you think about the benefits of being mentored, let's just talk about it from that side of the table right now. How have mentors benefited you in your life, and what's the effect been as you reflect back on this over the years?
Wow, I've got so many stories. But I'll go back to high school, and this is going to sound a little crazy for your listeners. And so again, this is a small farming community in Iowa. And we had the new football coach move in and his wife. And so she was the new Spanish teacher, Jan Gruber. But she also came with this goal that she was going to start this award-winning drill team, dance team, for those of you, anyone that doesn't understand what a drill team is. Now, we don't even have a dance studio in town. Most of us hadn't taken dance lessons, but we got rhythm. And what happened is, this is where I actually learned perfect practice. I learned that I'm probably a pretty good teacher. I learned how to rehearse. And so we would take these routines and break like a 3.5 minute routine down step by step. However, when we were practicing, we were having a great time. So fast forward, Jan, we're performing for the hometown crowd. They think we're great. We go and we enroll in the first statewide competition. Now, what this means is Little West Bend, Iowa is going to be competing against schools four times their size. And I remember walking into Sioux City East High School, and, we've got our little purple outfits on. We polished our white tennis shoes, and we had blue eye makeup. I mean, oh my gosh. And the Sioux City East girls walk in, and they all just seemed tall and elegant, and they were not wearing blue eye makeup. All right. And so, but, Jan was one that was like, show up and try, do your best, and have fun. So we showed up and we danced our little hearts out. Well, then it came time for the announcements, and it's third place and XYZ school. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense because, well, they're 3 times larger than us. Second place, ABC school. Well, that makes sense too. They've had a drill team, I understand, for like 7 years. First place, West Bend, Iowa.
Yeah, there you go.
And we all stood like statues. We're like, did the guy screw up? And then he had to say it twice. And I mean, we just stormed that floor, raised the trophy high. There's blue eye makeup all over the place. Now, how does that story relate? Well, you take a look at, we would also, to raise money, we would host clinics. So we learned to be teachers. Guess what profession I ended up in? I have learned to practice and rehearse a lot. Guess where I learned that? In high school from Jan Gruber. And you can have a lot of fun doing it. So this is where I'm hoping to encourage people to go back in time, because who you are today, it might have occurred 40, 50 years ago. And then you can give credit to those mentors. Now, unfortunately, Jan has passed away. However, her husband, Dick, will be getting a copy of the book.
I love it.
Oh, it's so good. What's interesting to listen to this story, and then I got some flashbacks, actually podcast flashbacks, believe it or not, because it's kind of a canned question, and you've probably experienced it, Colleen. I know Daryl has. And the question goes something like this: if you could go back to your, what would you tell your younger self? Like, if you could go back in time, it's like a canned podcast question for some of the people that use it. And I've always said this, and it's been the same response all the time. In my 20s, I wish I would have had mentors and coaches.
Yeah.
Every single time. And it's just embedded in my head because I didn't realize the power of all this until way later in life.
Well, you know what happens? I call these, I'm entering the wisdom years. I'm never going to call myself old. I'm entering wisdom years.
There you go.
And you know what happens is what a mentor can do. Now, the pace of technology and the pace of change, which I talk about in the book, it's you've got to have mentors. You can't go it alone anymore. But what a mentor can do is you've been there, done that. There's life after discouragement, a disappointment. A mentor can also be a truth teller for you. And they can be some of the greatest mentors where we've all got blind spots. And somebody that cares about you will sit down with you and point out that blind spot. And in fact, when I was VP of sales at Varsity, I had a wonderful mentor. I wrote about him in my second book, and he'll be in this book as well. And I remember going into his office, and I'm telling you, we were exceeding sales. I'm thinking easy peasy, probably a little arrogant, frankly. And we sat down, and he congratulates me on a good year. And he said, but Colleen, I've been observing some things, and there's some things that got to change. So, here's me. Easy peasy, just walked out the room.
Right.
And he's got my full attention. And he said, you are so driven that when you come into this office and you are first in, last out, I appreciate that. You're not looking left or right. I don't even think you say good morning to your assistant. And she's here as often as you are, early. That's got to change. And there's more to the story. But now think about that. What courage did that take for a general manager to have that conversation with a VP of sales that was exceeding sales? And thank goodness he did, because, when I got over being mad, I think I did the, what do you call that? The angry cry or something, I had enough self-awareness to go, wow, when did I turn into that person that wasn't appreciating people? That's not who I am. And it changed from that day forward.
Wow. Yeah. That is true. A mentorship is not all candies and roses and happy. Sometimes it's the cold glass of water in the face that we need from somebody. So I'm curious for our friends listening in. I know we need more mentors on this earth. We need more mentors for salespeople, especially the generations that are coming into the profession. For people who are listening going, you know what, I think I'd like to be a mentor. I'd like to get proactive about that in my life. I had people help me out. What would you say to somebody that's thinking about becoming a mentor and getting started? I know you already said, don't get overwhelmed. This isn't a, 16-hour a week job to be a mentor. So coach us a little bit on how could you become a mentor and pay it forward?
So I'm glad you're asking this question, because the reason I'm writing this book, it's more of a why book than a how-to book. I can answer the question because we do have it answered in the book. But, you think about it. This is the classic knowing and doing gap. Big Brothers Big Sisters has 30,000 kids waiting to be mentored.
Wow.
So we all know it needs to happen, right? We all know it. Why don't we do it? Well, there's two things I think that happen. Time. I'm busy raising my own kids. I've got aging parents, and I work full time. And so my suggestion there is make it easy. So let's say, for example, you go into the office and more people are going back in. And I think there's some real positive things with that. By the way, you get a lot of accidental mentorship like I did. But, you could have a Mentor Monday, or you could host a lunch and say, ask me anything. And all everybody does is packs a lunch. They pack their questions and you show up. And, when you get to the age we are, and I'm not saying I'm not constantly learning, because I'm an avid reader. I listen to podcasts. So I'm a student. But you probably forgotten more than most of the young mentees know. And so you don't have to have some big PowerPoint deck and a bunch of notes. You just speak to what you know. And sometimes it's going to be skill related, and sometimes it's going to be personal related. And so you could find time, if you're a hiker like I am, invite a mentee. Hey, I'm taking a hike today, and make it a flat hike if they're not in shape. Okay. But you can take a walk. So tack it on to something you already do. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Hey,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because I like this proactive part about this, but I just got to flip this around if we can for just a second. This is my philosophy on this, is sometimes mentors just show up when you're not looking for them. Because quite often, some people have asked me, I really am looking for a mentor, or do you know anyone that could mentor me? And my classic response is they'll show up when you least expect it. Is there any validity to any of this through your eyes, Colleen?
Well, it goes back to when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. I do believe that. However, here is what I have learned through some of the research. I think the mentors need to be more proactive. For some reason, mentees feel hesitant. Now, you've got companies that have formal mentorship relationships. However, I'm not even sure how well some of those are working. So I think it's incumbent upon the mentor, look around. Who seems lost? And it can be the new person on the block, but the new person on the block can be a 50 or 60-year-old. So I think it's incumbent on both of us to look up. And frankly, in our world where most of us are looking down at our phones all the time, we have lost the ability to look up and around and just pay attention. So, it could be in a meeting and you see somebody in the meeting where you can tell they absolutely have no clue as to what's being said. You go up to that person afterwards and you have to have the right words and approach. And then maybe you sit down with them for 15 or 30 minutes. See, it can just be paying attention. So I think it's incumbent. Mentees get braver because I have to tell you, most mentors are happy to do it. Mentors, you need to be paying more attention and not waiting for the opportunity.
It's interesting, Colleen, as I'm reflecting on this, probably the most I get involved in mentoring these days is people want to talk about their business or, getting something going. And at the end of those conversations, I just had one earlier this week. At the end of those conversations, everyone will always say, thank you so much for sharing time. And I go, of course, you're welcome. But also say these types of conversations are so valuable for me because I remember things I've forgotten and I get new ideas in the process. So I think like any time that I've mentored somebody, especially around business and all of that, I end up leaving. I feel like I end up leaving with more than they got. It's almost not fair, but I'm curious your experience. My experience has been, hey, this time is well invested because the other person is going to benefit, but I'm going to also benefit as well. I'm curious what your experience has been.
Well, I would put a big ditto on that. I mean, and part of it is, like you said, you're reminded of things you've forgotten. And also the mentee is going to provide some perspective, right?
True.
And so, I was at an event at Colorado University, and it was the graduation event of empowering women in just business. And so I go in and present the emotional intelligence program to them. So one young lady was just about getting ready to graduate. And so I had seen her last year. She had been in the classroom. And I said, how's it going? I see you're almost getting ready to graduate. She said, yeah, I'm really ready. She goes, I waitress. And, she goes to school full time. She waitresses. These are generally students that don't have a lot of money. And she said, I'm just ready to be one of the people that I'm waiting on. And I'm telling you, it struck my heart. And I said, you know what? When you go out to interview and the fact that you've gone to school full time, you have waitressed and put your way through school, I am telling you, if you're with the right company, they are going to give you a big gold star and they're going to be smart enough to hire you. And just that word, she was like, you really think so? Because see, she was looking at waitressing as kind of this not so good profession. I don't know about you, but if I'm looking at a kid that's going to college, working their way through school, that tells me work ethic, persistence, perseverance, no entitlement, a whole bunch of other competencies. But see, she just needed that reminder. I'm sure her mentor had told her that the year prior, but it was a good reminder for me, like, pay attention and give that word of encouragement. See, that's mentorship. And just don't say something like, oh, you're going to be okay. I explained to her why you're going to be a great candidate. And I meant it.
Oh, this is so good. So, Colleen, a lot of our listeners, there's a wide variety of listeners, and that they're sales professionals, sales leaders, and executives. I'm sitting here thinking to all the executives that are out there and all the sales leaders, imagine what would it be like as you develop the cultures of your company.
Yes.
If you set up mentorship programs inside your company. I think it's something that would raise the bar and watch what would start happening to results.
Well, you take a look at some of the major research out there. Gallup for years has said everybody needs a best friend at work. McKinsey did a study and they found they were studying why people were quitting in 2021. And it wasn't just the quiet quitting move.
Yeah.
These were people that are quitting. Well, number one reason under the McKinsey study was people didn't feel valued. And Gallup, it's not a best friend at work. So now let's back up. Have we just all of a sudden started hiring managers that don't care? No, the problem is most managers are overscheduled. And when you're overscheduled, you don't have time to show empathy because the empathy takes time. You don't have time to have deep conversations. You might just have sales looking at the numbers. And so often a mentor can augment a manager's role. And it can even be a little safer to where maybe at that point they're kind of like, I don't really want my manager to know, but I'm scared to death. I'm intimidated. And hopefully with good training and coaching, sales leaders have those conversations. But I think the pace at which we're moving requires mentorship. People are just having a tough time. Like if you look at when the phone was invented, I think it was 1849. Then you go to the cell phone, 2010. 70 years to adapt to that technology. AI came on the scene full force, what, 2.5 years ago?
Yeah.
So companies really don't have a choice. We've got to start getting mentors out there to help people not feel like they have to go it alone, to keep up the pace of change.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's in all of the divisions, departments of a company and all the professions, this may be most true when it comes to sales. And, you know, I reflect back in the early days, you know, I was, I think 21 years old when I started selling and, you know, you walk in, I didn't know anything. I was so green and, you know, I'll be candid. I didn't have anyone to mentor me. My sales leader was the exact opposite of a mentor. And well, that's not true. I had Danny in the office took me under his wing and helped me out. It was a little bit awkward. It wasn't, but I learned from him and I learned from some other people as well. And I just think about how much faster I would have gotten traction had I had a mentor that, you know, was able to help me either inside the office or outside the office or both. And I'm like Larry, I wish I'd had that early on. I didn't. I had to figure it out myself. And, you know, I almost quit several times. It's a miracle, actually. It really is.
It was interesting. When I started with Varsity, they were in startup mode. So they were the David and Goliath fight. Now, today, they are a $3 billion company. They are the Goliath. However, when we started, you know, you went to Memphis, Tennessee, and you got 1 day of training. Then you went back to your territory and you enrolled in the second program. It was called GGG, Go Get 'Em, Good Luck, right? And so you were sitting there and you were trying to figure it out. And they were, I mean, it was no fault of their own because they gave you great opportunities. However, they also, as they were building out this first sales team of which I was on, they hired veterans away from other competitors. And so I remember these two, and Larry, to your point, I didn't know they were mentors. Betty and Lynette, and they were running the state of Georgia at the time. Now, by any description, these are a couple of tough old broads. I mean, you know, Lynette could make a drag on a cigarette last 5 minutes. Betty would look over glasses. She did not suffer fools well, right? I mean, but I will tell you, you talk about selling from the heart.
Yeah.
They had a heart for young new reps like me. So on more than one occasion, I'd call them up and I'd have a coach that maybe was upset with me. And they would just walk me through how to manage the situation. Now, here's what's interesting. The corporate office didn't know this. They weren't doing it for money. They weren't doing it for glory. I believe that somewhere, and I'm probably making this up, they just believed if we can get these youngsters, these youngins up to speed, we'll become a great company. And I believe that's one of the many, many reasons why they are still a great company today.
I love it.
Hey, I have to throw this out. So this whole, I've enjoyed this conversation, Colleen, about mentorship. And this is this is flashback. So this is flashbacks to when I started in the 80s. Daryl will pick on me. I know it's going to come. I'm embracing for it. But I remember.
I'm a mentor for you, Larry.
No, when I started selling in the 80s, I had to write out with the top salesperson.
Which is
which is good. There's a good point to it, and sometimes there's bad points to it.
Because they might be complaining.
Pardon me?
I'll let you finish your story.
No. It's all good. It's all good. But I sit there and I look back and I go, man, there were some bad things I picked up. I mean, this is flashback. This is deja vu central, like 40 some odd years ago. I picked up some really bad habits by writing out the top salesperson. So there's some good points and some bad points to this. Somehow I still think it exists today, and maybe we need to change a couple of that.
Well, I think, when we regard a good salesperson back in the 80s is they were hitting their numbers.
Yep.
That did not mean they hit and modeled a great attitude. Right. And so I think you have to be very careful who you send people out to ride with. I
Yep.
want you hitting the numbers. I want you to be happy that you're working. I want you to be realistic. Life isn't perfect every day. And so I know when I was a VP of sales, I instituted training managers. So because we were bringing on 20 new hires a year at that time, and not, that's probably not a lot for some companies listening, but it was a lot for us. And so the sales managers, they had 20 direct reports already. So the training managers ran really good territories. They were exceeding goal. And in my opinion, had good attitudes. They loved the company. Now they're realistic. The company wasn't doing everything perfect. So those were the people that I would go out and then I literally have them set up a new rep's office. I mean, because they're coming home from training and it's overwhelming. They don't know where to find this and that. And I do think that helped get some of that ramp up shortened.
I love it. What a fantastic conversation, as always, Colleen. And I know everybody. We always have fun when we get together. I know our listeners are asking a question, and that question is, how do I get more Colleen Stanley in my life?
Well, they can go to the website. That's probably the easiest place. And that website is SalesLeadershipDevelopment.com.
Awesome.
And link in with me on LinkedIn.
We'll put all of that in the show notes and your books as well. Colleen, thank you so much for all you're working on. We look forward to seeing the fruit of this conversation. And as your book comes out sometime in the future, we're honored to have this conversation with you today. This has been amazing. And yeah, as I said, we are cheering you on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
Awesome. Larry, what a great conversation.
I know. Hey, but you didn't even slam me. I was waiting for it.
You set it up.
I set you up. By the way, I set you up and you didn't pull through on this one.
Well, we've been at this all day long poking at you. So, hey, you get a pass. It's so funny, Larry, you said the mentor. This is such a great topic. And I think this is really a core thing when it comes to being a selling from the heart professional is, I said paying it back or paying it forward. It's actually paying it back because so many of us have been mentored. But I remember you talked about that field ride. I went on that first field ride with my mentor. We got to lunch. And of course, back then it was Pizza Hut buffet. So we eat healthy lunch at Pizza Hut and we're on the way out the door and paying the bill. And he reaches in the fish bowl with all the business cards and grabs the business cards out. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm prospecting. And so we're not always mentored correctly, but that whole concept is saying, how can we help somebody else and cheer them on in all the different ways, whether it's formal or just a word of encouragement, looking to the left and the right. I think Colleen is onto something here that is something that we can all take to heart.
Absolutely. And here's what I'd encourage all of us to think about, and Daryl, and you can wrap this up afterwards, is, go out, search, be proactive. Find one person, whether that be in your office or a friend or somebody's close to you, son or daughter. Offer to help.
Yeah.
Give back, inspire and influence somebody. That's what great leaders do. That's what great mentors do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Thank you to everybody who is subscribing on YouTube. Our YouTube presence continues to grow. And all that means is it spreads this word of authenticity and trust, this movement inside the sales profession we all love. So thank you for subscribing on YouTube. We've got some great episodes coming up. You don't want to miss it. So stay tuned. And until next time, keep being genuine, keep being authentic, keep building trust. Be a mentor, and most of all,
sell from the heart.